Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful Friday afternoon in seclusion. We'll all be coming together to share the latest and greatest tips related to the teletherapy and the engagement strategies that Jody recommends, as well as all that you've learned in the last few weeks of really working on this telework, telecommute, everything. Before we get started with Jody, wanted to kick things over to Stacey Pranap-Fulhassan, the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, to provide a bit of an update for telehealth and any other updates related to these services in Ohio. Stacey.
Thank you, Derek, and good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you're all safe and well. A few things that we found out over the last week to 10 days that I thought you might be interested in. There was an Ohio Council for Behavioral Health and Family Services Providers. They did a survey of their membership. They had 125 agencies respond, and that was on April 3rd, to give you the time frame. Just in terms of Ohio's behavioral health workforce and agency work, 50% of the agencies of that 125 said that they were keeping usual office hours. 20% were completely closed. About 78% said that they were doing most of their services by telehealth. So the vast majority were doing primary telehealth services. 70% said they were accepting new admissions, but again, you can assume those were via telehealth. And none of them had suspended outpatient admissions, although there was a percentage that weren't taking new residential clients. Then just in terms of the health of the behavioral health system at this point in time, there were almost 900 layoffs as of April 3rd. And around a quarter of the agencies were anticipating, let me turn that around, up to half the agencies were anticipating 20 to 25% reductions in their revenue. So all of that to say that, the importance of doing telehealth in order to continue continuity of care, in order to help individuals who are new to care or have relapsed from whatever disorders that they had. It's crucial. It's crucial for the individual's health. It's also crucial for the agency's health, to be blunt. And we can't help anybody if the doors aren't open and, if we don't have revenue, frankly. So I appreciate Jody being able to do this follow-up webinar. And please always keep in mind that you can reach out to us at Ohio MHAS, to me, to Scott Anderson, and we appreciate the work that you do in the community. That's all.
Thanks, Stacey. And for folks that have questions, we'll be engaging the chat feature today. So on the right-hand side there toward the bottom of your GoToWebinar navigation panel is that chat feature. So questions that you want everybody to see, you can ask that in the chat. If there's some logistical things that you want me to look into, then you can ask that into the question section. With that, I'll get things kicked over to Michael Bazzelli, PG&O's Associate Director, to introduce Jody as well as Dr. Heather Chapman. Mike.
Thank Derek. Thank you, Stacey, for that update. So we have Jody Bechtold with the Better Institute in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with us today. Ohio had Jody out in Cleveland and Columbus in November of 2019 for day-long trainings on telehealth, some very robust trainings. And when, this crisis hit Ohio in early to mid-March, Derek and I thought that we would get back on the phone with Jody to see if she wanted to do kind of some mini versions of those day-long trainings. So a couple weeks ago, we had a webinar that was recorded. So if you were not able to attend that, you could go back and watch that on the PG&O website. And that was kind of the a simmered down introduction to telehealth. And today we have her, Jody, talking about how to engage. So we got really great feedback from her day-long trainings in Cleveland and Columbus back in November. So we thought, this was the perfect opportunity to bring her back and kind of give some more support to folks who went through that training and folks who weren't able to go through that training. So we have Jody back with us today, and we're really grateful for that. And we also have Dr. Heather Chapman from the Cleveland VA. So many of you probably know Dr. Chapman or have been at some of her trainings. And Dr. Chapman has done teletherapy for a number of years and also does our tele-supervision calls, if you will, our statewide supervision calls on the fourth Friday of every month. So she has experience in that, and she's kind of here to kind of engage in some of that and discussion that goes on. But also, if any of you have kind of some more Ohio-specific questions, Dr. Chapman may be able to have some insight on that. And kind of with that, we have our next statewide supervision call next Friday, April 24th, from noon to 1:30. And that number is 712-775-7031 and code 712762. And you can get all of that information again and register for our supervision calls at pgnohio.org/events. So for the remaining of the fiscal year, those are April 24th, which is next Friday, Friday, May 22nd, and Friday, June 26th. So we have a nice little cast here for the next 90 minutes. And I know that Jody has a lot of discussion. She wants to hear from all of you on how this has been going. And I'm gonna toss it over to Jody to kind of give herself a little more robust introduction, and we'll be on our way. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Derek, and everyone at PGNO for having me back. Stacy, those are some really great statistics. I think that's encouraging to see how many mental health providers are able to, make such a switch during a crisis. So hopefully your numbers just continue to improve. And Dr. Chapman, so glad to have you today on this webinar with me. I'm sure you'll be able to add a lot of wonderful experience to the conversation. And as Mike had mentioned, I do encourage a lot more chatting this time. I know that in the first webinar, for those who attended, it was really about just absorbing a lot of information. And, collectively today, all of us together as a community have a lot to share. I don't think that one particular person is more of an expert than anyone else. I think it's just more about just, opening up our eyes and our minds to, a new way of engaging our clients when it's over video. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Sorry, Derek, there we go. Okay, so if you didn't know who I was from the first webinar, my name's Jody Bechtold. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Pennsylvania. I hold an ICGC Level 2 and a BACC certification with the International Gambling Counselor Certification Board. I am the CEO of the Better Institute. It's a small group practice, 2 locations and virtual with 5 of us. I serve on 2 different boards right now, the National Council on Problem Gambling and the International Gambling Counselor Certification Board. I would like to encourage you to pull out your phone at some point and text the number 55444 and type the word webinar to add to my mailing list. I will inform you we're about to kick off a series of gambling treatment webinars that are on demand, so you can watch them on your time as opposed to fitting them in and hoping that they fit with the schedule of a particular week. I'm also the co-author of the Gambling Disorder Treatment Handbook that will be released early 2021, and so the mailing list will also inform you of when that is coming out. So let's take a moment really to reflect how things are going since the last webinar during this crisis. For many, has time moved really slow for you? Is it going extremely fast? Are you finding that you're working really long days or more hours? just share in the chat box kind of what has been your experience in the last few weeks. I know for me, I had some extremely long days. I wanted to make sure that we were there for everyone that needed mental health services, particularly problem gambling. And the first few weeks was pretty full, pretty packed. It's now started to kind of calibrate a little bit more and make it a lot more manageable. But that's what we would expect in a crisis. So I've noticed that many people are moving from a state of crisis, kind of that slow, fuzzy, then maybe a little bit more anxious, confused. Some people are feeling desperate, and others are just straight out bored. And this is maybe us. This is also our clients, the people that we're serving. So really just share your experiences of what you have noticed as well. And again, use the chat box whenever possible.
And for those of you that are new to chat, you can access that on the bottom right-hand side of your GoToWebinar navigation panel, and please chat it up. I see some people are working in the question section. Questions will only be shared with me. I'm not the only one to see that, but the chat feature is able to be seen by everybody. So please utilize the chat for sharing what's going on with you.
Thank you, Derek. I thought it would be helpful to introduce you to an article that I came across, and I found it extremely helpful. It's a great article that talks about the 5 stages of grief and actually introduces the 6th stage of grief that most of us are accustomed to, and really discusses what people are feeling during this pandemic. I've shared this with some of my clients. I've read parts of it with other clients. It just allowed for an open discussion with clients. And so it might be helpful for you personally as well as professionally. It'll give your clients permission to talk about their feelings, what scares them, what makes them grateful. And, the thing that really helped several of my clients in this discussion was we're used to grief and understanding, that we want to get towards the acceptance phase of maybe someone passing, maybe losing a position or a job, something like that. And what made the pandemic just feel so different was that we just don't know when this is going to end. And I think that was what was helping allow clients to really have that conversation and identify how this is different than grief that they might have experienced in the past. So great. I see some comments here about, the difficult times, lots of redesign, rethinking, having to be very deliberate. It looks like, Heather, you're saying you've always done telework, but it's really different now. So it is different. It's not a choice. And I think that's part of what's different is we have to really let people know we want to be there to help them. And the only way we can reach them right now is tele for the majority of outpatient services. I know that residential would be very different, and we can talk about that a little bit as well throughout the webinar. But anyway, so, this article is really helpful. I'd encourage all of you it's a quick read, a 3-minute read, and it offers a lot for discussion and allowing people to just share why this feels different and they didn't realize they could call it grief for the pandemic. This is also another article that was in the New York Times. It's an opinion article, but it really boldly reminds us of how many people are suffering and struggling. And so again, encourage you to read this article and see how it might apply to your clinical practice with your clients. It really gives context to the crisis from both that physical and mental health perspective that individuals might be dealing with. And so we wanted to do a polling question right now and just kind of, I know Stacy was able to share kind of where people are at an agency level with adopting telehealth and teletherapy. But let's go ahead and do a question now about what your comfort level is since our last webinar. And again, that was on March 27th, which for many might feel like a really long time ago.
And that poll option will be popping up on your screen. So take a quick moment to say, for the question, what is your comfort level with teletherapy today compared to 3 weeks ago? Either more comfortable, about the same, or less comfortable. And it looks like from the attendee side, the chat option isn't there. So I'm researching that on the back end to see what we can do to make that pop back up. So again, take a quick moment to answer our quick poll. What is your comfort level with teletherapy today compared to 3 weeks ago? We've got 10 more seconds to weigh in. And this is the results.
Oh, that's wonderful. So 62% are more comfortable, 37% are about the same, and only 2% less comfortable. So my hope would be that by the end of this webinar, the 2% will also, find some more strategies that maybe can help them get back to about the same or more comfortable with teletherapy. That's a really encouraging sign to see that. So it's really great. So again, I talked about this a little bit in the first webinar, how have you adjusted to this new way of delivering care? And what words describe your feelings, your challenges? For some, it might be awkward, fumbling, excited, accomplished, right? And we really want to think about all of those. I know many of us are working long days. We're dealing with some serious and intense stories and situations. I know for me, just to kind of give you, an idea of across the board of the different client situations I have experienced, I had to help a woman who was a healthcare worker that unfortunately was in a domestic violence situation. And her way of dealing with that in the past is that she would go and hide at the casino. And she's now faced with having to leave her partner and trying to decide how to do that. And the shelters were full. Friends did not want her to stay with them temporarily because she is a healthcare worker and is still working. And they were concerned about her being on the front lines and then coming home. And so we ultimately, secured some funding and some services to get her into a hotel for safety. And so, that's been a very one that weighed heavy for me, as you can all imagine. I see that, some people are definitely having long days, having to really ramp up quickly, the mixed experiences of how to assist with feelings of loss and grief, and yet at the same time have our own gratitude that we're able to provide, and our services are needed at this time. And then some are saying that the days are going really fast with all the webinars and just trying to catch up. So yeah, a wide range of things in terms of what we're feeling. And we're not commuting home right now. And, some of us have used our commute time to help process, to help punch out, to do that mental shift before getting home at the end of the day. And so I've had to purposely be mindful about my new commute home as I walk down my steps to go to the rest, the other parts of my house. And I'm sure a lot of you can really relate to that as well. And on the other side, let's talk about some of the probably more humorous things we've encountered with the challenge of delivering video care. I don't know about you, but I actually was a little surprised when one of my clients clicked onto the video session and he was laying in bed. And I thought, well, I would never thought it would come to this. that someone would be laying in their bed. And typically I might want to, make a suggestion what would be more appropriate, but at the same time, their bedroom was the only place that they could have any privacy. So we have to really understand everybody's kind of on top of each other at home. So yeah, definitely some funny stories. And how many of you learned that the video froze when you were making, right in the middle of talking about something, and you left that, what I would call less than desirable freeze frame? I've had that. So, please share in the chat feature any funny stories that you've had, because we all could use a bit of a laugh once in a while. Self-care is definitely something we have to think about all the time in our profession, but especially now as I think about, that commute and how we used to use that commute time as a way of a part of our self-care process. So, let's again review quickly the technology and mental health. I know we talked about the confidentiality, HIPAA compliant privacy rule, and end-to-end encryption in the first webinar. Some might be handling these aspects with more confidence, and others might still be feeling very overwhelmed. So I think just keeping mindful that we all experience the crisis, and so when we too can get easily overwhelmed. So Deborah says, for sure the freeze screen. I call them and continue that way. Yep. So when the screen freezes, we definitely have to put on our social work or clinical problem solving skills and come up with another way to reach people. I love it. So the other thing I was thinking was, the video sessions is what we're really mastering, but now you might be experiencing clients that want to email you, and there might be confusion around emailing, and as well as how are you handling maybe releases of information and signatures. We didn't really talk about that in the first webinar. We were just trying to get everybody up and running as quickly as possible. But emails, thinking about emails, and are they encrypted emails, and what we need to do to get encryption, or how do we handle the new digital challenge for digital signatures. So we'll talk about those a little bit in this webinar. And for those who were not attendees of the first webinar, I just want to make sure we all have the same definition of what we mean by teletherapy. We're talking about the delivery of mental health services by a licensed mental health professional, and they're not provided in person. And they are video conferencing that allows you to deliver services to your clients and to bill for your services. So if you are new to this webinar, I encourage you to listen to the first one that we had recorded. It goes much more in depth. It's teletherapy by definition is not phone therapy. We do know during this crisis we have relaxed rules around that. You still cannot do it in a state where you are not licensed and also bill for your services. And it's not recorded or delivered on delay, and it's obviously not in person. We do know that some features like FaceTime, Skype, and even Hangout Meets are not HIPAA compliant. And during these relaxed times of the HIPAA regulations, you can use those. But I did get several questions and comments after the last webinar. It was really helpful. People sent in a lot of questions to me post-webinar, and they said, they really wanted to start out the right way, because it does help their clients not have to shift again after we're through the COVID-19 crisis, the post-COVID-19 crisis. So really helpful to kind of think about those things. Some very helpful comments coming in about people using doxy.me and not having any issues. That's great to hear, Kevin, as well as trying to keep your cat from appearing on your screen. Thank you, Lisa. The cat and the dog, some clients might actually not think it's a normal session if the pet doesn't show up. And it really does help people just kind of have that humor and laughter, and know that we're all just figuring things out as best as we can. And we can't always be as professional and polished in these interesting times. So thank you for the humorous one. I like that. I've had my dog barking in the background and trying to hit mute and things like that. So the informed consent and the crisis policy, again, I want to cover this quickly because it's so vitally important when we're doing remote services, and really understand what are you doing to make sure that clients are informed and that you have a crisis policy that addresses being remote. So I included for this one an example that is from Dr. Frederick Reamer. He's a social worker and a lawyer, does a lot of great ethical and tech trainings. And so I wanted to put this on the screen for you to just give you an idea of some wording that he has used and made publicly available. Really talking about explaining what video conferencing technology is, the risks associated, as you can see in number 3, right? We talked about the interruptions, that freeze screen, things like that. And being able to also inform them that there might be other individuals as part of the healthcare team that would have access to some information just because they're part of the healthcare team. And it might not always be just medical or mental health individuals. It might be someone that's from the technology side. And so this is just really helpful to inform them that the treatment team now might include someone else that can help with the video equipment. And last, that you're getting their consent, that they are voluntarily participating in this and agreeing to participate in this. So hopefully that's helpful for you to kind of get some wording if you haven't already put together something a little bit more formal. Thank you for the comments. I love having these come in. Been using teletherapy before the pandemic, love it. I don't accept responsibility for COVID-19, but talking with my higher power, asking for strength to work through to my retirement age, and being able to work from home. That's a great comment. Thank you, Deborah. I like that. So hopefully this will help you a little bit with some of the wording. Again, addressing what is a crisis policy and thinking what do you have to do differently now that people are not in your waiting room or in your office should they become in a crisis. And so really make sure that you're getting that emergency contact person that can be contacted in that emergency, as well as the hospital name and phone number, the police department name and phone number, if they are in a geographical location that you are not familiar with. And making sure that you just have that documented and you review that with your clients. Here's an example of emergency procedure specific to telehealth. This is just a part of, I know that Derek was able to share 2 PDFs that I found through some of my access. Those are just, again, examples. You'll need to customize them specifically to your needs. But this really helps to spell out what is an emergency contact person and why would you be assisting and asking for their assistance at a certain time, and just so that the client really understands why that other person is needed, and helping them to understand it's different from a release of information for ongoing communication, and that actually might help people a little bit understand why they need to designate that person. And so electronic signatures. So we didn't talk about this in the last webinar. Many of you probably have developed a solution, maybe put something together. Some might still be mailing particular forms to clients, maybe with a self-addressed stamped envelope. Again, we were putting together what I would call some band-aids just to get through the crisis. And so share what you guys have been doing to get people's signatures during this time. But this is also now an opportunity to think longer term. What is going to be your best strategy for being able to handle someone across the state of Ohio that you might never meet in person, and being able to handle all of your documentation and your signatures in an appropriate way moving forward. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm just going to give you an idea of some of the things that are out there. The first one is HelloSign. Maybe some of you have used that. Again, I always wanted to put something out there that is free as a way for you to use something as maybe just a Band-Aid or a bridge until you come up with a longer term solution that's more comprehensive. And so you can see, again, you can pay more than for the free version, and there's always features that come with that compared to what comes with the free version. Everyone is familiar probably with the name DocuSign. It's been around for quite some time, and there is no free version of DocuSign. You can see now that you can pay for it, and it's single use for $15 or up to 5 users, things like that. Again, what would be your experience? What are your needs right now, the time frame, as well as how many providers and practitioners are you considering? But DocuSign, from the client experience, has been known to be very easy, effortless, almost frictionless in terms of getting signatures. Sign Now is another one people have stumbled upon or looked into, and on their website they actually compared their features to Adobe Sign and DocuSign. So here's a snapshot of what they're offering in the comparison. And again, what are you considering using just to get through the COVID-19 period, or what are you going to consider using long-term as part of your overall software solution for your practice? And last, Adobe Sign. This, you can see, is quite expensive. Here you can, based on the website, let's say we put in 7 providers, you're looking at $2,500 annually just to collect signatures from clients. So a wide range of options. They all have their positives, their negatives, things like that. And so this is a standalone solution if you don't already have it as part of your software solution. So again, a comment came in that their telehealth has a specific consent with electronic signatures. That's perfect. And you can also use Adobe Acrobat. So lots of different moving parts out there. Really take the time to think. But I say all of this because we're talking about the client experience, getting video. And how are they accessing video? Is that an email with a link? Then you're asking them for signatures. How are they getting requests for those signatures? And I just say this kind of with a little bit of humor, that the client experience, if you keep adding different solutions to solve your remote working dilemmas, the client might feel completely overwhelmed after a while. So really take into account the client experience when you are dealing with these forms and the video together. Someone else is sharing that they've asked clients to print out the document, fill in the emergency information, scan it to the phone or camera, and email it back. Yep, perfect. Adobe EchoSign is cheaper. That's great. Thank you for that help. And I'm glad you're finding this useful to think about, because we definitely want to understand what the client experience is when we're talking about engagement. How do we get them engaged, and how do we keep them engaged, right? And so really think, are you using standalone video right now, and then you have software for your documentation that might have some scheduling and some reminders that way? And are you using billing software that you might have to then deal with invoicing or sending them a receipt? And then just software for signatures for informed consent, the privacy policy, release of information, even the treatment plan. What is their experience? I had a call this week with an agency, and they initially were asking a question about electronic signature software that they should use. But when we took a look at the 30,000 feet view, they had one system for the client documentation, and typically they had the clients sign things in the office. They had 4 different billing systems depending on their funding source and the requirements of where they get signatures from the client for that. And they were going to implement a standalone video and then a standalone e-signature solution. And that's a lot just even for the staff to adjust to. Eventually the staff will, but again, what is that client experience if they have to interact with up to 3 different software platforms? And this is an experience that is repeated every time you have a new client. So again, staff might get used to it and forget what it's like for that first engagement experience with the client. David, thank you. You're saying to use a phone app scanner. It's free. It scans the documents, email from your phone. Wonderful. You guys are finding some really great tech ways to get the information to clients as well as get it back. So thank you for that. So, if you have too many different systems, different, separate systems, it can be too easy to make mistakes, to drop things, let things fall through the cracks. It could even be difficult to onboard new staff because it just seems so overwhelming and confusing. So really consider what your long-term plan needs to be for implementing technology and determine what makes the most sense for the client experience, especially their first experience with you, as well as the staff. Yep, some people are saying that their clients might have a printer, asking them to fill it out, sign it, and then, and put the words electronic signature behind their name. That's a great one too. And depending on the use, you're going to have to investigate long-term things that are HIPAA compliant and confidential. Again, some things are more relaxed right now, but the signature one can become quite an issue long-term. All right, and the video etiquette. Again, we talked briefly about this in the last webinar. There's some key points to still remember, but how are you guys doing with getting more comfortable with video and the etiquette? We might be forced to use video and phone with everyone right now, and I'm sure you're starting to see which clients really thrive and which clients will eventually choose or need to return to in-person. So definitely share some of your experiences as we talk about the video. Overall, I'm sure you found how important it is to start and end on time. Again, that impacts engagement long-term. You get to stare at yourself all day. I told you, to remember that because you're going to see yourself in that camera frame. Make sure you're reviewing that emergency protocol. I can't tell you how expressing gratitude has gone such a long ways with individuals because they really do want the help and they're really glad that we're just taking the time to make sure that we're there for them, we're present for them, and acknowledging that. It really goes a long way when you're experiencing this type of grief. I talked before about the screen freeze when you're making a funny face, and any other interruptions that we all know is part of life right now. That we can't help, like the cat coming on the screen and things like that. So definitely share any of the experiences that you have had. So let's kind of jump into the engagement strategies. And again, I'm just here to really springboard the thought process of some ideas, but I'm sure all of you have some great engagement strategies to share as well. So let's make sure we do that. So here I'm really just talking about some basic tips, maybe some suggestions of what to do. And I know that in the last one, we talked about telephone therapy, and some of you might actually stick with telephone therapy right now just because of the quarantine and some other remote access issues and things like that. And this is you can see you're doing your thing, you're doing it really well, and your client is just so engaged on the other side and focused and productive. And for a lot this might be the case. However, for some this might be the case where you really just realize that they're not that engaged. It's difficult to keep them engaged. So phone might backfire for some clients, and keep that in mind. I remember a time when I was doing video coaching for older adults that were at high risk for readmission for congestive heart failure as part of a research study. And one woman kept saying that she wanted to be on the phone. And I kept saying to her, I have to use video because that's part of the research protocol. And she said with the straightest face, but it's so easy for me to lie to you over the phone. When I see you, it's so much harder to lie. And, I share that just to keep you thinking about the video experience. And it does help with engagement, and it helps in many other ways, just as we expect and benefit from with in-person. So really think about that as, trying to accommodate that phone versus video. Thank you for some of these comments. Yes, love the video. A good headset for privacy is important. and for sure with the, the face-to-face conversation, as well as some are not tech savvy, so you have to use phone therapy. I send them an email to look at while we're in session. That's another great strategy. We'll talk about that too. So you're already doing it as an engagement strategy for phone, and for some, we're going to also need to do that for video, right? But whenever it is possible, encourage the video so that you have that in-person simulation experience, right? So the moral of this whole story is to really try and get people to convert when possible, and use the phone as a backup for technology reasons, signal strength, things like that. And the opposite I've had happen, believe it or not, with the video is I have a client who is new to recovery for gambling, and he's a remote worker in the tech industry. And so he's got the whole setup you can imagine in his home office with the expensive headset and microphone, multiple monitors. And so video is really, really comfortable for him, almost too comfortable. So I literally had to do video expectations with him in the first session because he kept turning his chair and looking at other monitors, almost like they were all muscle memory movements, as if he was working and attending a video meeting and not a therapy session. And so I said to him, I really want you to turn your chair, look at this video camera, and really treat this as the therapy session that it is, as if we were in person. And he had to think for a minute and said, you know what, you're right. I'm just so comfortable in this space that and it's lunchtime that we have this session. And so thank you for the reminder. So we want to, think of, helping people with that video etiquette as much as possible, because they actually benefit from the session experience more when we do that. So any other, great, I have one about screen sharing. I'm going to talk about that too. Deborah, you're on it. Thank you so much. I love all the things that you're sharing. So let's really talk about some of those strategies. This, virtual cup of coffee. I'm not sure how many of you would offer people water, maybe a cup of tea in your office setting. And so some clients might be missing that, or remember that we are in social isolation in many respects, and this is one way of having that social interaction. And so my therapists and my team have, for some clients, done the virtual cup of coffee where the client shows up with their tea or coffee, and we do as well, and we kind of sit and say, let's just really be mindful about this moment, this hour, enjoy our coffee, and I'm here for you for your session and for during this time. What would you like to talk about today? So social distancing does not mean social isolation, but many people might not be leaving their house at all throughout the entire week. And so any little things we can do to generate more of that in-person experience is great. A quick question came through. Any advice for handling insurance companies that are denying claims or making much lower reimbursements? Heather, I'm not sure if you have any input on this in the state of Ohio. I have not experienced that from the commercial plans that that are across multiple states. So I'm not sure, Kenneth, if you're referring to anything maybe more state specific.
Yeah, I don't know of that happening either. I actually have seen that they've loosened those restrictions. So all I can say is keep asking the insurance company. So I don't know if the person has anything specific that they can be more specific on, but I haven't seen that as much. I've seen it go the opposite way, actually.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
even for methadone and Suboxone, and they're really loosening up all the usual restrictions.
All right, thank you for that. Kenneth, if there's any way we can take this offline and be able to help you further, please let us know. And you're right, Heather, I've seen them loosen it as well. In my region, the health insurance companies have waived co-pays and all deductibles for a certain time period during this COVID crisis. So they're showing their responsibility for making sure that people get the mental health and addiction services that they truly need and deserve. Okay, so from the webinar for Medicaid, they do not accept O2 for teletherapy. They said to bill the place of service as 11 or 99. So that was Deborah's information. Yeah, and again, I said in the previous webinar, sometimes it's a trial and error with one or two of the insurance companies that you use to see if they can even tolerate the O2. Some of their systems cannot. So the 11 would be the backup in most places, but thank you for that. So some of the chats were coming through already about this in terms of things you could email your clients. So these are really active strategies. Is there something you can email, before the session? Or what we have also been finding very helpful is to keep an email going during the session. Some of our clients, again, during crisis, your brain is a little bit more fuzzy, your short-term memory is not quite where it normally is. And so clients are having a little bit more trouble remembering from the beginning of the session to the end some of the finer points. And so we have been summarizing those in an email. We've also been providing maybe homework, to-do list, the top 3 things that they're going to do, from now until the next appointment, sending a link to, from a website or an article. And that's why I shared those in the beginning of the webinar, 2 of those articles that were very, very helpful. But again, we're talking about email. And so, unless your email is already encrypted, what you want to do is set the tone with your clients and say, I'm going to be emailing you some things, but I want to remind you that email is not where you share any therapy related content, because I'm not able to guarantee your confidentiality and privacy. So email needs to be something very basic and not an ongoing way of continuing therapy. But still, I encourage everyone to move towards encrypted whenever possible. Thank you. Another person shared that, I'm going to try and see all of these, and they're starting to come in fast. This is great. For some, video is equivalent to in-person and sometimes even better. Thanks, Heather, some of the codes to use. Video is very helpful. And to emailing for homework, I'm trying to just catch up with some of this. Let's see. One client, we're using a workbook to heighten engagement. Yep, I'm going to talk about that in the very next slide. Thanks, Kevin, because doing that is very, very helpful. So, thinking about this one, I came across and I wanted to share with everyone, the coronavirus anxiety workbook. So it's several pages, has places for people to really check the box and then write in some of their own interactions and things that they want to do. It is not copyright protected. The authors are actually encouraging sharing this and just giving, attributions to their website, or, acknowledge it in some way. And clients would then be able to download it if they have a printer, and really talk about it during the session. I was able to do a screen share with one of my clients because all she had was a tablet, and she really said this was very helpful because she said, I'm having trouble remembering things during this crisis, and I'm more anxious right now than I have been in the past. And so those 2 things together has made it much more difficult. So hopefully you'll find this helpful, and if anybody has other workbooks in this same vein that they could share, that would be great. But thanks, Derek, for sharing that in the chat box. I don't know how many of you have used therapy cards. Therapy cards can be really helpful, in specific sessions with individuals just in person. And so I've used them depending on the issue, maybe helping to get someone unstuck, learning to communicate better, or just to get their mind in a better place. And so, think about these therapy cards. I'm showing a couple from the company Best Self, and this picture is intimacy cards. So I'm actually doing quite a lot of couples counseling right now by video, Who would have ever thought we would say that? And these cards are actually really helpful in getting them to practice certain communication skills in session. So maybe, you know, and I know for some clients, staying at home, not leaving their apartment or their place of residence, they're maybe not working, they're feeling like every day is Groundhog Day. And they were even asking, like, what's the date today, or what day of the week is it? And so being able to just get them focused on something that's outside of this monotony that they're struggling with right now and really re-engage has been very helpful. Ken is saying that he has found giving more homework, exercises, handouts has been very helpful, the type of an activity workbook, you know, because many do have a lot of time and dealing with that boredom. So then there's another question about HIPAA compliance actually means for video. We covered that in the first webinar, Kenneth, because it's really about that end-to-end encryption. And in video, data while in transit is the most vulnerable. And for video, that's the whole time data is being transmitted, is back and forth through video. And so you have to use a HIPAA compliant video platform. And another one here, depending again on the type of individuals you're working with, best self sells, it's called Courage Over Comfort. And it helps, you know, different categories in learning, random categories about health, experiences, relationship, and just self. And again, how do we help people kind of get out of the monotony or out of all that media that they might be ingesting right now on a daily basis, and think about something and engage in something that's much more helpful and healthy. They even have therapy cards for younger individuals, and that might also be a nice way for you to be able to engage with the younger generation during these times. There's, yeah, lots of comments. You guys are really a fan of the workbooks and the different cards, and a nice, pleasant activity that you can even create and share together. You know, you're hearing from all of us very similar experiences that you know, it's not always about making sure that you're staying true to a CBT technique over and over again until they master it. These are times when clients really just need to have some sense of normalcy, as well as human connection, as well as, you know, kind of focusing on reducing any negative symptoms that they might be experiencing. And so we're just, you know, doing whatever we can. These cards are something I've been using for almost 10 years now, and they are from a company called Points of View, and maybe called the Coaching Game. And they have two different ones, but as you really take time to look at some of these pictures, the picture and the word don't always match at first glance. And it provides an opportunity for you to use a card as a metaphor, maybe for where your client is right now, their current issue, their current situation. And when you get really comfortable with these cards, and all I do is hold them up to the video camera. Some clients have said, text me a picture of that card. You know, so we're just doing some creative things. But what you're able to do is use metaphors, which are so powerful, to help people think about something from a different perspective, as opposed to the same way that they approach problem solving. And as clients get really experienced with this, as they, you know, it opens them up. I've had clients that will start a session and they'll say, I think it's a card kind of session. Let's pull out those cards. And so they are even knowing how this helps them to get unstuck or have that additional perspective they might not have thought of before. And they have another game called Punctum. And this is really fun because it's a card with just a picture, no word. And then you have a word, and then you have a question. And the client then has to interpret all three of these together. And so this generates more insight, conversation, and awareness that, you know, around a particular issue, or how they're feeling that day, or an ongoing problem that they just can't seem to come to resolution. And so I like this one where it shows a woman laughing. The word is authenticity. The question is, how do people see me? And so you can imagine how this could generate new insights and awareness for the person on a very personal level. It might be that they're not being authentic, and they know that they're not being real with how they're feeling with their emotions right now, but they're trying to make people think that they're doing fine and everything is great. So hopefully you'll find those as helpful. Check out their website and see what you can come across in terms of additional tools. Some of you have already commented in the chat feature about the screen share. And depending on your video software, you might be able to share your screen at times. And again, that can be helpful. Like I had said, a woman who had a tablet, so she didn't have a way of downloading and printing anything. So we just shared the screen and reviewed the handout on the screen. That might be good for different diagrams. I know Zoom also allows for screen share. And so you could really, decide how this might be helpful for a subset of your clients. And this has got on a whole new meaning of walking with your clients. Again, we have people that are staying in their place of residence, that shelter in place. They might become very sedentary. I work with quite a lot of older adults that might have, or they do have some other chronic medical conditions and things like that. And I've encouraged them to, with safety, of course, walk around the room during the session, get some steps in, actually get a little bit of exercise during our therapy session. Think about how people come into our physical office and they sit down, right? Well, they've been doing that day in and day out, depending on some of the monotony. And so it seems like a strange strategy to use with some clients, but it's actually going to be very helpful in reminding them they still have to get some exercise and, walk around even though they're shelter in place. And in terms of, overall discussion, I'd love to hear more about what you're doing because we, my staff and I, we come together on a weekly basis and continue to share strategies. We talk about, different, with our clients, sometimes we just talk about their hobbies. We talk about projects. We talk about, is there something that they can do around their home that they said they always wanted to but didn't have time to do? Even cleaning out kitchen cupboards, hall closets, things like that, and helping clients to get their mind off of TV and media that they might have been consuming in much larger time every day and being more constructive with their time. I've had people talk about movies and documentaries that they are watching or that they want to watch. Anything that we can do to bring some sense of normalcy to this current time, while also respecting that these are still very strange times. And we're talking about the stages of grief. And when you think about the last 3 weeks, we have all been going through that as well. Kind of that denial that this was really a pandemic, and then confusion and bargaining, like, oh, this isn't going to last very long. And this week, and for me, with my clients, I felt a lot more of them being depressed and angry about what's going on. And our role is really to help ourselves and help them get to the acceptance of what this pandemic is, and post COVID-19, still being able to process it and talk about it. So hopefully that will help you as well. Think about what other strategies you can use with your clients. And Thomas, you were asking the therapy cards. It's points of view. And again, when you think about that, it's really, so just Google points of view cards and see what website comes up. It's an international company, so these things are used across the globe. And so I found it just really helpful in the past 10 years using this, so thank you for that. And let's talk about some specific issues that we might be encountering with gambling disorders and our clients that have a gambling problem. And depending on where you live and work right now, I don't know if you're noticing increase in TV advertising for the online gambling, casino slots, and even playing the lottery. I was really surprised on a weekend. I had the TV on in the background, how many advertisements were for online gambling in the state of Pennsylvania. So definitely something we have to, tune in with our clients and, check in and ask them. So we know that too little too little money as well as too much money are the greatest triggers to gamble. And so I had a woman recently, and all in one day, she is a caregiver for both her brother who has a stroke and her mother who was just released from the hospital. And and one day she found out that she was denied additional services for her brother for caregiving, which means that she's still caregiving 7 days a week, all day, all night, which we know is not sustainable. On that same day, her husband came home and said that he was laid off and that her adult son was also laid off. And so you can imagine someone in early recovery where their mind might go. And unfortunately for her, that day, it just felt so desperate that she went online and gambled a lot of money with the whole thought in her mind that she was going to win enough money to take care of her family that was being hit so hard. So we really have to understand how right now, this is really impacting many of those with a problem gambling. I don't know if you have other people that are abstaining from gambling and they're starting to say, well, this is kind of easy because, I feel like I'm in a bubble. And I'm doing really well. And we know we have to prepare them as well for after COVID-19 when the gambling activities resume. Many are talking about the stimulus check as well as if they filed their taxes and they're getting a refund. Stimulus checks just started coming out Wednesday for some. And so I don't know if you're actually able to have a conversation with any of your clients about how they're going to manage that money. Because again, if they're getting inundated with a lot of media advertisements, they might think again from that faulty thinking that they can double their money during these tough times. The idle time is also screen time. There's a lot that's being shown on Facebook and LinkedIn about how much screen time is going up for everyone of all ages. And, is that something where maybe clients might be shifting to video gaming because they're bored? And we know that video gaming can trigger the same parts of the brain as gambling for some people, depending on the timeline of did they start with gaming before they were introduced to gambling. And what about losing the job, the reduced hours, as well as the unemployment? We really have to talk with our clients about these things and make sure we're addressing them. So I'm not sure if you're experiencing anything. I'll wait for a second, see if anything comes in the chat. And hopefully it's just, we can get around this. Yeah, some your clients are incarcerated, so they're probably not eligible for the stimulus. That's true. And Heather, I don't know if you can share anything that might be more related to residential that's applicable right now in these times.
We do everything though. We do residential and outpatient as well. So I think we got all of the above. So we've got people with money. We have some people not filing for stimulus checks or anything because they're afraid because of back taxes or they've been somewhat off the grid. So they're actually deciding not to do that because of a long history of interesting behaviors. But I do have people that are working less hours and are actually in the best shape that they've ever been in their life because of the casinos being closed. So that's interesting. We had a couple people in a group that we did the other day. All our groups are on telephone and video. We had a couple of people the other day say that lottery is, I think the woman said more sparkly, has a sparkle that it's never had before. So I thought that was interesting and never ever had thought about lottery. And some of them are beginning to think about lottery because of course lottery is still available. I don't know.
Yeah, no, those are helpful. I know in Pennsylvania, there's a lot you can do with the lottery online now.
Right.
That satisfies people not having to leave the house and go get lottery tickets and, different versions of a scratch off or something like that. So yeah, we're seeing very similar things across the board. You're right. So thank you for that. How do we use the internet specifically with people with problem gambling? I can talk about as well as, but this applies to all of our clients. I have, come up with a list of some TED Talks that I thought were really helpful, as well as YouTube videos to share with my clients. Again, if we're dealing with any of that idle time, how do we fill their time with useful information as opposed to some of the media that's currently just inundating them with the same thing over and over again. You all know from Ohio, the podcast, there's two of them, Jamie with After Gambling podcast, and then there's also the All In Addicted Gamblers podcast that's co-hosted by Jeff Wasserman out of Delaware. The apps, most of us are very comfortable with Insight Timer for meditation. Helped a woman get on Insight Timer, helped her find a couple of meditations for sleep and for anxiety, all while during the session. And she found that really helpful because she said she wasn't sure if she'd have the confidence to do it on her own the first time. We've come across some different ones. I like one called I Am, I and then AM. It's a daily affirmation app that actually mimics a text message and randomly sends you text messages with positive affirmations. And I have people that get that, and then they maybe journal, or they just take a moment to be mindful about what that affirmation is and what it says about them. And there's one called House Party app where up to 7 friends stay connected and play games together. So depending on the individual, their age and things like that, that also might be an option. And YouTube, again, can be very productive or a complete waste of time, depending on how people use it. And so if you can come up with a set of YouTube videos that are very informative, ask them to watch it, ask them to come back the next session and talk about what they liked, what they learned, things like that. Again, filling people's time. The affirmation app is I Am, I and then AM. And let's see, okay, so yeah, 10% happier with YouTube Live. Okay. These are good, all right. Clients to invest in virtual meetings and podcasts. Yep. Go ahead, Heather.
I'm going to highly, highly, highly recommend the 10% app. It's unbelievably great. It's really, really great. It's like the top people that you can ever imagine, and they're right there live 3 o'clock every day, and then they also tape it. But I've done it with multiple clients. It's absolutely an amazing thing. I do it myself. It's the top people. It's a wonderful gift that Dan Harris and all of his people are doing.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. So Fred's saying he's trying to get clients to invest in virtual meetings and podcasts. Most have outright said that they would not be doing that. Yeah, some won't, but others, the longer that we are in this shelter in place, are more open to try new things just because of the boredom, and every day feels the same. So maybe that will, time will help you as well. I also wanted to just cover, are you recommending anything for people to read? The use of audiobooks might be an alternative for people to just put on their headphones, and it feels like they're just, able to escape a little bit easier since they're all living together in, tight quarters. I did also come across a website called Libby App, LIBBY. app.com. So Derek, I don't know if you can put that into the chat, but libbyapp.com will connect you to your local library virtually, and then show you which books and audiobooks you can have access to for free. And so again, I would encourage you to test this out first before you just give the website to your clients. But this is a way, again, it doesn't cost anything because the library is free, and being able to recommend a book or an audiobook for a little bit more instant consumption might be helpful as well. All right, so let's go ahead and come up with, are there any other suggestions that you guys are having? Brene Brown has a podcast that's fantastic. Yes. Have we found anything that Brene Brown hasn't done that's fantastic, right? I know that one just kicked off in March, I believe. So glad to hear you're enjoying that one. Lots of clients really like her as well. Fred, I would continue to suggest virtual meetings, maybe just being able to call in by phone so people don't have to be on the screen is a good first step. And that might be the, kind of take the baby steps to getting them to join in on meetings would be another good one. Sometimes the podcast is a way to get them also more accustomed before they jump into the virtual. So hopefully that might help as well. Okay, so let's do another polling question. Really want to understand, Derek and I talked about this a lot this week about, your thoughts in terms of continuing to use video as part of your clinical practice post-COVID-19. So Derek, go ahead and get that going. Thank you.
Yep, the poll's launching now. Do you plan to use video as part of your practice post-COVID-19? Select yes, maybe, or no. And you've got 10 more seconds to chime in. And that poll question is, do you plan to use video as part of your practice post-COVID-19? Yes, maybe, or no. And here are your results.
All right, that's great. I mean, that's well over 70, almost 80% are yes and maybe to continuing to use this as part of your practice. I would say that there's a couple different levels to really understand this. At a high level, policy level, it's my wish, my hope that, once Medicaid and Medicare reimbursed and allowed tele, we've got to find a way to not let them take that back because it really does help some people gain access to mental health that they might not otherwise have access to. And at a practice level for all of you, I think it's really important to understand that teletherapy kind of got shoved at all of us. It's a you don't even have a choice. This is how you do it kind of thing. But when it's post-COVID-19, you're going to have some clients that will return to you in person. Some will want a hybrid. They want that choice of sometimes in person, sometimes by video. It could be their schedule, their travel, the location, the costs that are associated, their time, and others, they will never go back to in person. They love video and that's what they want. And that's the way they want to have services delivered to them. And so I really would tell you, you're probably going to have a hybrid in terms of what you offer post-COVID-19 and things to think about with that. Megan, I wanted to acknowledge that you said you were doing challenges, weekly challenges with your clients. That is a great one. Some individuals are really benefiting from maybe the daily exercise, something productive, anything like you're saying, for at least 30 minutes each day. Yeah, the challenges are really helpful for that accountability and to really make the day have some sense of meaning and purpose for many people that are shelter in place. So thank you for that. Some really good comments and suggestions. Thank you so much for all the participation today. It's been really helpful. And so if there are any other questions, comments, Heather, I'm not sure if you have any additional comments to share with everyone, but this is going to conclude the webinar for today.
I guess the only other thing I would add is, and it just might be us, but here in the GTP, we do a lot of outpatient residential brief intervention. We do the whole range. But I would say we're more tired than we've ever been. And I think that's what I think because we have to be so deliberate and think through everything. I think this has been hard and really deliberately thinking about like what we need to do to take care of ourselves. One thing that I'm mindful of, and they are as well, is that our home people don't understand sort of how work is these days. I mean, it's extremely challenging. And of course, we can go across state lines because we're government. So, I mean, we're dealing with people in New Jersey and New York, and a lot of really big names in GA have passed away in New York and New Jersey. And it's just kind of heartbreaking. Also, the worry about contracting the illness has been a fear. I think it's dissipating now, but initially was a fear when we had groups going on a couple weeks ago. I don't know. I'm just noting how we have to take care of ourselves a little better. I have to take care of myself a little better. I don't know.
Absolutely.
That's what
I couldn't agree more. The days were long and they felt very heavy. And I even remember saying to my husband one day, it was just a very heavy, heavy day for me. And, I don't normally I don't normally feel that way, working in this industry. I just love it so much. But you're right. We're going through our own grieving. We're trying to play catch up and get ahead of where the clients are feeling and going. And everything is to the forefront. Things aren't as automatic pilot. They're more deliberate, like you said. And it really does take a lot more. So the self-care is critical. We talk about it all the time. We don't always do it, but in times like these, self-care is definitely very important for all of us, because there's a lot of individuals out there that need us. The statistics are, and our calendars show us that people need us. And that worry about contracting COVID-19 or, the virus, things like that, or how long this is going to be, how long is shelter in place going to last? All of those unknowns make things, and that uncertainty make things, feel heavier. And yeah, much more tired. So I agree with you, Heather, 100%. These are very, very tough times, even though we're doing good and serving and helping others. They're very tough times for all of us. Some different comments, flexibility in the role is important. Someone identified that they are actually scheduling as many, but they're feeling very drained. Something about anger management, being able to really address that. Again, go back to those stages of grief, and we're all experiencing to a greater or lesser degree some of those stages as well. Deborah said, I've never worked harder from home than going into the office, but she loves it. I agree. I love it too. I think that finding a happy medium post COVID-19 is going to be really important for all of us. In terms of what we can sustain, because the amount of intensity that we've been doing is not sustainable either, long term. So that self-care is critical. Some other question on specific TED Talks or podcasts. There's so many TED Talks out there. You can go, I had a woman that was really struggling with understanding what anxiety was, and she found a TED Talk. We found it together on anxiety, and she said, wow, that was really, really informative and helpful. So, just checking a few. It just depends on what your client's needs are, and ways that they can absorb information a different way than you and them just talking, as well as different from just reading. So hopefully that would be helpful as well. Okay. David, you're saying that you've had temporary loss about 25% of your clients because they don't want to do video therapy. Yeah, I've had some that have dropped off for a variety of reasons. I had one woman that said that she just couldn't wrap her mind around the psychoanalytic relationship if it was by video. So I said, well, I'm here for you when you're ready to resume. I just wanted to make sure that it didn't sound like the relationship was over, but I respected that, she just couldn't see doing it. And so, anybody else having some suggestions they could share when clients are saying that they just don't want to do video? I know in the previous webinar I shared that I just said to individuals, it's really, really important for you to have your mental health or your, problem gambling treatment. And, as a professional and as someone who really cares about you, I really want you to have that. And I really don't want you to say no to it. Can you at least give it a try? Can you try by phone first? Things like that. So. Yeah, everybody's got a couple that are, fell off the radar. And in rural areas, phone might be the best way to reach out to them. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for all of the input. As I said before, not one of us is an expert over another person. We're all in this together, just trying to help people continue to think of different ways to engage and keep clients engaged as every week goes by, that we are continuing to have shelter in place, or that fear and worry of being out in public with other people for long periods of time. And anything I can do to help you, feel free to reach out to me. I know, Derek, you have quite a lot of resources as well for the individuals in Ohio. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Jody. And those final comments are there in that little question section, so you can check those out. And if you have additional thoughts or needs, feel free to reach out to me. And I want to remind everybody about pgnohio.org/events. Mike talked about this at the top of the call with the gambling supervision calls that we have every month, and the next one is available to register, will be held next week. Also, we've got a couple other webinars that are going on from Pennsylvania. Problem Gambling Network of Ohio is the Ohio affiliate to the National Council for Problem Gambling. And we've got the PA affiliate chapter as well that's doing some webinars. So if you feel free to pop on and check out those details as well. And for those that are from other states that would like to share what's going on with your state with us, please let us know. Happy to promote and share other events that are going on in your neck of the woods. Just as a reminder, this session will be recorded, or has been recorded, and the link along with handouts will be sent out to everyone who's registered early next week. So look for it there. If you don't see it by close of business Monday, then check your spam folder. If you don't see it there, then reach out to me. With that, thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Jody and Stacy, for all of your input and insight for what we have going on now. Today is Friday, which means it's a weekend, even though it may not feel like it. So take some time with your family. Enjoy this time as much as possible with those family members. And we look forward to connecting with you in the weeks ahead virtually, but hopefully at some point face-to-face as well. So have a great weekend, and we'll look forward to connecting with you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Derek. Be well, be safe.
Bye.